Dropping my daughter Mia off at school had always been my favorite part of the day. The smell of freshly brewed coffee in the air, the hum of cars lining up, and the sight of bright, energetic children bouncing into classrooms reminded me of the good in life. Even after my divorce, I made sure not to miss it. It was my anchor in the storm that my personal life had become. That morning started no differently. Mia sat beside me in her booster seat, humming the theme song to her favorite show while clutching her art project, a construction paper butterfly she'd worked on all night. I remember glancing at her and smiling, thinking, she's the best thing I've ever done. The school parking lot was bustling as usual. Minivans pulled in and out, parents waved distracted goodbyes, and teachers greeted students by name. I navigated the chaos, pulled into my usual spot, and unbuckled Mia's seatbelt. "Ready, butterfly?" I asked her. She giggled at the nickname and nodded eagerly. But as I stepped out of the car, I froze. There, leaning casually against a shiny black SUV parked 2 spaces down, was Todd, my ex-wife's new husband. And standing next to him, her arms crossed and an annoyingly smug smile plastered on her face, was Angela, my ex-wife. What the hell are they doing here? They didn't have any kids at this school. Angela had moved across town after we finalized the divorce, into Todd's spacious house on the wealthier side of the city. Theirs was a different world, private schools, gated communities, and cocktail parties. This public school, where Mia and I had carved out our little routine, didn't fit into their polished lifestyle. Yet there they were. Angela looked radiant, as she always did. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her dress expensive but understated. Todd, tall and broad-shouldered, exuded confidence in a way that bordered on arrogance. Together, they looked like something out of a lifestyle magazine, a stark contrast to me, a guy in jeans and a hoodie just trying to get through the day without spilling coffee on himself. Angela spotted me first, her smile widening into something that felt more like a challenge than a greeting. Todd followed her gaze and smirked, as if this whole encounter was some private joke between them. I felt my stomach twist. They weren't here by accident. Angela's smile didn't waver as she nudged Todd, who straightened from his relaxed pose. My heart pounded, but I forced myself to keep a neutral expression. I wasn't about to give them the satisfaction of seeing me rattled. "Daddy, let's go!" Mia's cheerful voice brought me back to the moment. I bent down, grabbing her art project and her backpack. "Go ahead, sweetie," I said, my voice calmer than I felt. "I'll catch up." Mia skipped off toward the teacher on duty, oblivious to the storm brewing behind her. As soon as she was out of earshot, I turned to face them. "Well, if it isn't the happy couple," I said, the words dripping with sarcasm. "What are you doing here?" Angela tilted her head, her smile widening. "What? No hello? No, how have you been, Angela?" Her tone was playful, but her eyes glinted with something darker. Todd stood beside her, arms crossed over his chest, smirking like he had just won a prize. "Cut the crap," I snapped, stepping closer. "Why are you here?" Todd chuckled, shaking his head. "Relax, man. We just wanted to see how things were going with Mia." I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "Mia? Really? You two have never shown the slightest interest in her school life before. What's this sudden act?" Angela crossed her arms, her expression hardening. "She's my daughter too, you know. I have every right to be here." "Yeah? Then where were you during her last parent-teacher meeting?" I shot back. "Or the school play she begged you to come to?" Her face flushed, but she quickly recovered. "We've been busy. Not that I owe you an explanation." Todd clapped a hand on her shoulder. "Come on, babe. Let's not waste our energy defending ourselves. We're just here to make sure everything's good for Mia. That's all." His casual use of babe set my teeth on edge. He acted like this was his life now, his family. Like I was the outsider. My fist clenched at my sides, but I forced myself to stay calm. Losing my temper here would only play into their hands. "You don't belong here," I said through gritted teeth. "Mia's fine. She doesn't need your sudden interest in her life to confuse her." Angela leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. Confuse her? Or make her see that her dad isn't the only stable influence she has? The words hit like a slap. I took a deep breath, refusing to rise to the bait. Instead, I fixed my gaze on Todd. You're just loving this, aren't you? Todd shrugged, his smirk widening. I'm not here to start trouble, man. But if you want to turn this into a pissing contest, I'll win. Just saying. Before I could respond, Mia's teacher, Mrs. Jennings, approached with a warm smile, oblivious to the tension. Mr. Carter, good to see you. Mia's showing me her art project. She's so proud of it. Thank you, Mrs. Jennings, I replied, plastering on a polite smile. I'm glad she's excited. Angela quickly inserted herself into the conversation, her tones saccharine. I'm her mom, by the way. Angela. And this is my husband, Todd. Mrs. Jennings looked surprised but extended a hand. Oh, it's wonderful to meet you both. Mia is such a delight in class. Angela beamed as if she'd earned the compliment herself. That's wonderful to hear. We're hoping to be more involved moving forward. More involved? I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. Mrs. Jennings nodded politely and excused herself, leaving us alone again. Angela turned back to me, her expression triumphant. We'll see you around, I'm sure, she said, her voice light but loaded with implication. Not if I can help it, I muttered as they turned and walked away, hand in hand. Todd threw a glance over his shoulder, his smirk firmly in place. I stood there, fists clenched, watching as they got into their SUV and drove off. My blood boiled. This wasn't about Mia. It never was. This was about Angela and Todd trying to stake their claim in my life, to remind me that no matter how far I'd come since the divorce, they still had the power to mess with me. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. If they thought they could disrupt the life Mia and I had built, they were sorely mistaken. The drive home from the school was a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, and Mia chattered away in the back seat, blissfully unaware of the emotional hurricane inside me. I couldn't stop replaying the smirks, the smugness, the way Todd casually referred to Mia like she was his daughter. The thought sent a fresh wave of anger coursing through me. I managed to plaster on a smile when I pulled into our driveway. All right, kiddo, I said, turning back to her. You grab your backpack, and I'll get that masterpiece of yours. Mia giggled, hopping out of the car. Mrs. Jennings said my butterfly is the best she's ever seen. It is, sweetie, I said, lifting her artwork carefully. Now let's get it up on the fridge where it belongs. As we stepped inside, I felt the familiar comfort of our home wash over me. It wasn't a mansion, but it was ours. The walls were covered in Mia's crayon drawings, family photos, and remnants of the life I'd fought so hard to rebuild after Angela left. This was my sanctuary, a place I'd poured my heart into making safe and stable for Mia. But even as I helped her pin the butterfly to the fridge, my mind drifted back to Angela and Todd. Their presence at the school wasn't random. I knew it in my gut. They had an agenda, but what? Was it to undermine me? To show off how perfect their life was now? Or worse, to push for a bigger role in Mia's life, even though they'd barely lifted a finger for her over the past 2 years? I hated how easily they could rattle me. I thought I'd put Angela and everything she'd done behind me. But seeing her today, so self-assured and smug, brought all the memories rushing back like a tide I couldn't hold back. It had started with small cracks. Late nights at the office that turned into weekends. Angela claimed she was putting in extra hours for a promotion, and I believed her, at first. But then there were the unexplained texts, the constant laughter over her phone, and the way she'd suddenly become secretive about her plans. I tried to talk to her. I remember sitting her down one night after Mia had gone to bed. Angela, I said, you've been distant lately. Is something going on? She sighed, barely looking up from her phone. Nothing's going on, Daniel. You're imagining things. I pressed further, but every time, she deflected, turning it back on me. I was too paranoid. I wasn't supportive enough. I worked too much. The irony wasn't lost on me. considering her long hours were the very thing that had put distance between us. It wasn't until a mutual friend, confessed to me what she'd seen that I realized how blind I'd been. Angela wasn't working late, she was meeting Todd. At first, I refused to believe it. I didn't want to believe it. But the pieces started falling into place. The late nights, the hidden phone calls, the sudden need for space. The confrontation was ugly. She didn't deny it when I finally asked her outright. In fact, she almost seemed relieved to have it out in the open. "It just happened," she said, her tone flat, like she was talking about misplacing her car keys. "Todd and we have a connection." "A connection?" I'd spat, my voice shaking. "You're married, Angela. We have a daughter." "I'm not happy, Daniel," she said, crossing her arms. "I haven't been happy for years." The words stung more than I could have imagined. Years? How could she say that after everything we'd built together? After everything I'd done to provide for her and Mia? She'd already made her decision, though. By the time the divorce papers hit my desk, she was already living with Todd. "Daddy, you're staring at the fridge again." Mia's voice snapped me out of my thoughts. She was tugging on my sleeve, her little face tilted up to me with a curious look. "You okay?" she asked, her tone innocent but laced with concern. "Yeah, sweetheart," I said quickly, kneeling down to her level. "Just thinking about how lucky I am to have you." I kissed her forehead, earning a giggle. "Now, what's next on the agenda? Homework or snack time?" "Snack time," she declared, running to the pantry. I laughed, but the moment she turned away, my smile faltered. Angela and Todd were pushing into my world again, and I had a bad feeling this was just the beginning. Whatever their endgame was, I wasn't going to let them disrupt the life I'd built for Mia and me. If they wanted a fight, they were going to get one. The next few days passed uneventfully, at least on the surface. Mia went to school, I went to work, and we settled into our usual rhythm. But beneath the calm, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was brewing. Angela and Todd weren't the type to show up uninvited unless they had a reason, and I knew better than to underestimate them. That Friday, I got my answer. It started with an email from Mia's school. The subject line read, "Parent Involvement Opportunity, PTA Meeting Recap." I almost ignored it. PTA updates usually went straight to my spam folder, but something made me click. The email began innocuously enough, a summary of the recent meeting, upcoming events, fundraising goals. But then, buried halfway down the page, a paragraph stopped me cold. "We are thrilled to welcome 2 new members to our Parent Advisory Committee. Angela Carter and Todd Blake have generously volunteered to assist with the upcoming Family Fun Day and other key initiatives. Their enthusiasm and experience will surely be a great asset to our school community." I stared at the screen, my stomach dropping. Parent Advisory Committee? This wasn't random. This was calculated. Angela and Todd weren't just showing up. They were planting themselves squarely in my orbit. The anger hit fast and hard. How dare they? Angela had barely been involved in Mia's life since the divorce, and now she wanted to play the role of doting parent? And Todd, what experience did he have with anything other than wrecking marriages? I slammed my laptop shut and paced the room, trying to calm the storm building inside me. It was one thing for them to pop up at drop-off as a flex. It was another to insert themselves into the school where Mia and I had built a safe, stable environment. This wasn't their territory. It was ours. That evening, I sat down with Mia at dinner. I tried to broach the topic gently, not wanting to alarm her. "Hey, kiddo," I said, keeping my tone light. "Did you see your mom at school earlier this week?" Mia nodded, dunking a chicken nugget into ketchup. "Yeah, she and Todd were there. Mom said they might come back soon." Her words twisted in my gut. "Did they say why?" She shrugged. "Mom said she wants to help out more. She said Todd thinks it's important for us to all be a team." She scrunched her nose. "What does that mean, Daddy?" I forced a smile. "It means, well, I'm not really sure yet. But don't worry about it. You and I are already the best team there is, right?" Mia grinned. "Right. I watched her happily munch away, her innocence in stark contrast to the unease building in me. Angela's sudden involvement wasn't about Mia. It was about control. This was her way of asserting dominance, of showing me she could walk back into our lives whenever she wanted. But I wasn't going to let her. The real blow came on Sunday morning. I was helping Mia with a school project at the dining table when my phone buzzed. It was an email from Angela. The subject line read, "Family Discussion." My stomach clenched as I opened it. "Hi Daniel. I hope this email finds you well. I wanted to reach out regarding Mia's schooling and some ideas Todd and I have been discussing. We think it might be time to explore options that better suit her needs. Perhaps a private school with more resources and opportunities. Todd has already done some research, and we've found a few excellent options that we'd love to share with you. We'd also like to schedule a meeting to discuss our co-parenting arrangement. Now that Todd and I are more settled, we feel it's important to revisit our shared responsibilities and ensure we're all on the same page for Mia's future. Let us know what times work for you. Best regards, Angela." I read the email 3 times, each word stinging more than the last. Private school? Shared responsibilities? This wasn't about what was best for Mia. This was about control. About Todd trying to muscle his way into a role he had no right to. I felt my blood boiling as I slammed my laptop shut. Angela's nerve was unbelievable. She checked out of Mia's day-to-day life when it mattered most, and now she wanted to waltz back in and start making decisions. Over my dead body. That night, as I sat alone after putting Mia to bed, I made a decision. If Angela and Todd thought they could walk in and disrupt our lives, they were in for a rude awakening. I wasn't the same man they blindsided during the divorce. I'd fought too hard to build this life for Mia and me. I wasn't going to let them take it away. I opened my laptop and started drafting a response to Angela's email. But as I typed, I realized this wasn't just about sending a polite reply. This was about drawing a line in the sand. About making it clear that I wasn't going to roll over and let them take over. When I finally hit send, my message was short and to the point. "Angela, I'll review your suggestions, but Mia's doing just fine where she is. As for a meeting, I'll get back to you when my schedule allows. Please remember that Mia's stability is my top priority. Let's keep things focused on what's best for her, not anyone else's agenda. Daniel." As I closed my laptop, I felt a flicker of satisfaction. They'd started this fight, but I was going to finish it.by Monday morning. I was running on pure adrenaline. Angela and Todd's sudden push into Mia's life felt like a chess game where I hadn't even realized we'd started. And yet there they were, making bold moves, trying to knock me off balance. But if they thought I was just going to sit back and watch, they didn't know me at all. The first bombshell of the day hit before I even had a chance to finish my coffee. An email from the school's administration landed in my inbox with a subject line that felt like a punch to the gut. Proposed PTA leadership changes. I skimmed the email quickly, my heart racing. Dear parents, we are pleased to announce an upcoming vote regarding new leadership positions within the PTA. Angela Carter has expressed interest in taking on a co-chair role alongside our current chairperson. We believe her enthusiasm and fresh perspective could bring valuable contributions to our team. Please join us at the next meeting to cast your vote and discuss these exciting changes. My stomach churned. Angela wasn't just trying to involve herself in school events, she was planting herself at the very top. Co-chair of the PTA? She didn't care about fundraisers or bake sales. This was about making herself visible and wielding influence. I slammed my mug down on the counter harder than I meant to, causing Mia to look up from her cereal. "What's wrong, Daddy?" "Nothing, sweetie," I said, forcing a smile. "Just spilled my coffee, that's all." But inside, I was seething. That afternoon, I decided to swing by the school early for pickup. I wanted to talk to Mrs. Jennings, Mia's teacher, and see if she noticed anything unusual since Angela's and Todd's recent appearances. The hallway outside Mia's classroom buzzed with activity as parents arrived to collect their kids. I spotted Mrs. Jennings by her desk, tidying up papers. "Mrs. Jennings?" I said, stepping inside. Do you have a minute? She smiled warmly. Of course, Mr. Carter. What's on your mind? I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. I just wanted to check in about Mia. Have you noticed any changes lately? Maybe with her mood or how she's interacting with others. Mrs. Jennings tilted her head thoughtfully. Not really. She's been her usual bright and cheerful self. Though, she trailed off, a flicker of hesitation in her expression. What is it? I pressed. Well, your ex-wife stopped by again earlier today, she said. She and her husband brought in snacks for the class. The kids loved it, of course, but I thought it was unusual, given that they haven't been involved much before now. I clenched my jaw. Of course, they'd brought snacks. Angela and Todd weren't just showing up. They were winning over the staff and students with shallow gestures. I see, I said, keeping my tone even. Thanks for letting me know. If anything changes with Mia, please don't hesitate to reach out. Mrs. Jennings nodded, her expression kind. Of course, Mr. Carter. Mia's lucky to have you. When I got home that evening, I couldn't shake the image of Angela waltzing into Mia's classroom with Todd at her side, playing the perfect family. I needed answers, more than what Mrs. Jennings could provide. I grabbed my phone and called Sarah, my oldest friend and one of the few people who'd stood by me during the divorce. She worked as a journalist, and her investigative instincts were second to none. Sarah, I said as soon as she picked up, I need your help. She didn't miss a beat. What's going on? I quickly filled her in, detailing Angela's sudden involvement at Mia's school and the PD8 power play. Something's off about this, I finished. I don't know what they're planning, but I need to get ahead of it. Sarah was quiet for a moment, then said, Do you want me to dig into Todd? See if there's anything in his past that might give us leverage? Yes, I said immediately. Anything you can find. I'll start tonight, she promised. And Daniel? Don't let them rattle you. You've got the upper hand, you just don't realize it yet. The following day, Sarah sent me a text. We need to talk. Found something big. Call me. My stomach flipped as I dialed her number. What did you find? I asked as soon as she answered. Sarah's voice was grim. Todd's got a skeleton in his closet, Daniel. A big one. He was sued a few years ago by a former business partner for fraud. The case was settled out of court, but it doesn't look good. I gripped the phone tighter. Fraud? Are you serious? Dead serious, Sarah said. And that's not all. There's also a history of aggressive behavior. There's no record of arrests, but enough incidents to paint a picture. He's not as squeaky clean as he pretends to be. I let out a slow breath, my mind racing. Todd's facade was starting to crack, and I intended to use it to my advantage. Send me everything you've got, I said. You got it, Sarah replied. Just be careful, okay? This guy sounds like trouble. Trouble or not, I wasn't backing down. Angela and Todd thought they could steamroll their way into Mia's life and mine, but they just made the biggest mistake of all, underestimating me. By the time Sarah sent over the documents, I was more than ready to dig in. The file was dense, court records, financial summaries, and a series of ominous notes from Todd's past business dealings. I sat at my kitchen table late into the night, piecing together the puzzle of the man who'd wormed his way into my life. The fraud case was the centerpiece. A former business partner had accused Todd of embezzling funds from a joint venture. Though the case had been settled out of court, the evidence painted a clear picture. Todd had siphoned money for personal use, leaving the business partner scrambling to cover losses. Then there were the other incidents: angry disputes with contractors, questionable loans that mysteriously disappeared, and whispers of backdoor deals that ended with Todd walking away unscathed. The guy was a ticking time bomb, hiding behind a polished exterior and a smug grin. But what really made my blood boil was the timeline. The fraud case happened during the early stages of Todd's relationship with Angela, just before she left me. It was clear he hadn't just swept her off her feet. He'd sold her a fantasy, one built on lies and stolen money. The next day, I arrived at Mia's school determined to hold my ground. I parked earlier than usual and waited outside the main entrance, scanning the crowd for any sign of Angela and Todd. Sure enough, they arrived a few minutes later, stepping out of their black SUV like they were walking a red carpet. Angela wore a crisp white blouse and tailored slacks, her hair perfectly styled. Todd followed close behind, his broad shoulders squared as if he owned the place. The sight of them made my stomach turn. "Daniel," Angela said, spotting me. Her tone was as sugary as ever. "What a surprise to see you here so early." "Not really," I replied coolly. "I make it a point to be here for Mia. You know, like I've always been." Todd's smirk faltered slightly, but Angela recovered quickly. "Of course. And we're trying to do the same. It's important for Mia to see her parents working together." I stepped closer, lowering my voice so Mia wouldn't overhear if she arrived. "Let's drop the act, Angela. You and Todd have never been interested in working together. You're trying to muscle in on my life, and I'm not going to let it happen." Angela's eyes narrowed, and her polished demeanor slipped for a split second. "Mia deserves both her parents," she said sharply. "Not just you playing the hero." Todd, ever the opportunist, stepped in. "Relax, man. We're just trying to help. You don't have to make this harder than it needs to be." I turned to him, my voice low but firm. "Harder for who, Todd?" "You. The guy who's been hiding skeletons in his closet since day one. Don't think I don't know about the fraud case." The color drained from Todd's face, his smirk disappearing entirely. Angela glanced at him sharply, her composure cracking. "What are you talking about?" Angela demanded, her voice rising. "Oh, didn't he tell you?" I asked, my tone dripping with mock surprise. "Todd here has a history of screwing people over. But I guess you already knew that, considering how we met." Todd recovered quickly, forcing a laugh. "Nice try, Daniel. You're grasping at straws." "Am I?" I shot back, taking a step closer. "Because I've got the court records to prove it. And if you think I'm going to sit back while you two try to play happy family with my daughter, you're sorely mistaken." Angela's face twisted with anger, but before she could respond, Mia came bounding toward us, her backpack bouncing on her shoulders. "Daddy," she called, her voice full of excitement. I immediately softened, turning to her with a smile. "Hey, sweetheart. Ready to head home?" She nodded, then glanced curiously at Angela and Todd. "Hi, Mommy." "Hi, Todd." Angela forced a smile, crouching down to Mia's level. "Hi, honey. Did you have a good day at school?" "It was fun. We made a volcano in science," Mia said, her eyes lighting up. "That sounds amazing," Angela said, her tone overly sweet. "We'll have to talk more about it soon." Mia glanced at me, then back at Angela. "Can Todd come to Family Fun Day?" Her innocent question made my chest tighten. Angela's expression shifted instantly, her gaze darting to me as if daring me to contradict her. "Of course," Angela said quickly. "We'll all be there to cheer you on." I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm. "We'll see, kiddo," I said gently, ruffling Mia's hair. "Let's get going. I'm making spaghetti tonight." "Yay!" Mia cheered, grabbing my hand. Angela straightened, her eyes locking with mine. "This isn't over, Daniel," she said quietly. "No," I replied, meeting her gaze. "It's just getting started." That evening, I called Sarah again, filling her in on the confrontation. She let out a low whistle. "You really went for it, huh?" "They're not giving me a choice," I said. "This isn't just about Mia anymore. It's about control, and I'm not going to let them win." "You've got the upper hand," Sarah said firmly. "Keep pushing, and they'll show their true colors. People like Todd always do." I hung up feeling a renewed sense of determination. Angela and Todd thought they could waltz into my life and take over. But they'd underestimated how far I was willing to go to protect what mattered most. This was war now, and I wasn't about to lose. By midweek, The tension around Mia's school and our co-parenting arrangement was thick enough to cut with a knife. Angela and Todd were stepping up their efforts, inserting themselves into every facet of Mia's life they could reach. But I wasn't going to sit idly by. If they wanted a power struggle, I was more than prepared to meet them head-on. It started with an unexpected phone call from Mrs. Jennings. "Hi, Mr. Carter," she said, her tone polite but hesitant. "I wanted to inform you about a situation." My stomach tightened. "What kind of situation?" "Well," she began cautiously, "Angela and Todd came to the school earlier today. They brought a donation, a significant one actually, to help fund the new playground equipment." I leaned back in my chair, gripping the phone tighter. "A donation? From them?" "Yes," Mrs. Jennings said. "It's a generous gesture, of course, but I thought you'd want to know. They've been asking a lot of questions about Mia, her classes, her friends, her teachers." My pulse quickened. "What kind of questions?" Mrs. Jennings hesitated. "They seem overly involved, considering the circumstances. I just wanted to make sure you were aware of their increased presence." I clenched my jaw, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Thanks for letting me know. I appreciate you looking out for Mia." "Of course," she said. "Mia's happiness and safety are our top priorities." When I hung up, I sat in silence for a moment, trying to process the information. A donation? Angela and Todd were buying their way into the school now. And asking questions about Mia? That crossed the line. I pulled out my phone and called Sarah. "They're escalating," I said as soon as she answered. "Escalating how?" she asked. "They made a huge donation to the school and are asking questions about Mia," I explained. "This isn't about being involved. They're trying to take control." Sarah sighed. "They're playing the long game, Daniel. They're positioning themselves as the perfect parents, pillars of the community. But you've got something they don't, the truth." "And how do I use that?" I asked. Sarah paused. "Strategically. Todd's past is your ace. Wait for the right moment to bring it up, when it'll hit the hardest." The right moment came faster than I expected. That Friday, the school hosted its monthly family movie night, an event Mia had been looking forward to for weeks. I arrived early to grab good seats for us, only to find Angela and Todd already there. They were seated right in the middle of the room, chatting animatedly with other parents. I forced a smile as I approached. "Angela. Todd. Didn't expect to see you here." Angela turned, her smile so fake it made my teeth ache. "Daniel. We couldn't miss family movie night. Mia's been so excited." Todd chimed in with his usual smirk. "Figured we'd show her some support. You know, as a team." I ignored him, focusing on Mia, who had just spotted me. "Daddy," she called, running over and wrapping her arms around my waist. "Hey, Butterfly," I said, lifting her into a hug. "Ready for the movie?" "Yeah," she said, beaming. "Can I sit with Mommy and Todd too?" My heart sank. I glanced at Angela, who looked far too pleased with herself. "Of course, sweetheart," I said evenly. "We'll all sit together." The movie started, but I couldn't focus. I kept glancing at Angela and Todd, who were leaning into the role of the perfect couple. Todd whispered something to Mia during the previews, making her giggle. Angela reached over to adjust Mia's blanket, her movements calculated for maximum effect. Halfway through the movie, I couldn't take it anymore. I leaned over to Angela and whispered, "We need to talk. Now." She frowned but followed me out of the auditorium, leaving Todd with Mia. "What is it, Daniel?" she asked, crossing her arms. "This isn't about Mia," I said bluntly. "This is about you and Todd trying to control everything. You don't get to walk in here and pretend to be the perfect family." Angela's eyes narrowed. "We're not pretending. Mia deserves to see her parents working together." "Working together?" I laughed bitterly. "You mean steamrolling me and taking over? Let me tell you something, Angela, you and Todd are not fooling anyone." Her expression faltered, but she quickly recovered. "You're just jealous," she said coldly. Jealous that Todd and I have moved on and are building a life Mia can be part of. Jealous? I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Angela, do you even know who Todd really is? Because I do. Her confident facade cracked for a moment. What are you talking about? Ask him about the fraud case, I said. Ask him about the business partner he ripped off. Or the people he screwed over with his shady deals. You think you're building a life? You're building it on sand, Angela. And when it collapses, don't say I didn't warn you. Angela's face turned pale, and for the first time in years, she looked genuinely unsure of herself. You're lying, she said weakly. Am I? I replied, turning to head back inside. You might want to double-check before you bet everything on him. That night, as I tucked Mia into bed, I couldn't help but feel a flicker of satisfaction. Angela and Todd thought they could waltz into my life and rewrite the narrative, but they were wrong. The cracks were already starting to show. This wasn't just a battle for Mia. It was a battle for the truth, and I intended to win.by the following Monday. I could feel the shift. Angela and Todd's over-the-top involvement at Mia's school had cooled slightly, and Angela's confidence seemed dimmed. She hadn't sent any more passive-aggressive emails, and Todd's smug presence at school drop-offs was noticeably absent. It wasn't hard to imagine why. My little truth bomb about Todd's fraudulent past must have triggered some interesting conversations in their household. Angela was nothing if not calculating, and I knew the seed of doubt I'd planted would grow, slowly unraveling the perfect life she thought she'd built. Tuesday evening, I was at home helping Mia with her math homework when my phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced at it, expecting a text from Sarah or work, but my stomach tightened when I saw the name on the screen, Angela. I hesitated before answering, unsure of what I was walking into. Hello? Daniel, Angela said, her voice quieter than usual. I need to talk to you. Can we meet somewhere tomorrow? My eyebrows shot up. Angela never asked to meet in person unless it was to make some dramatic power play. This felt different. What's this about? I asked cautiously. It's about Mia, she said, though her voice lacked the usual conviction. And other things. Please. I sighed. Fine. Tomorrow after work. The coffee shop near Mia's school? Okay, she said quickly. Thank you. The next afternoon, I arrived at the coffee shop a few minutes early. I grabbed a table in the corner, nursing a black coffee as I watched the door. Angela walked in soon after, dressed sharply as always, but there was something off about her. She looked frazzled. She spotted me and made her way over, sliding into the seat across from me. Thanks for meeting me, she said, her hands wrapped tightly around her coffee cup. What's this about, Angela? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. She hesitated, her gaze dropping to the table. It's about what you said the other night. About Todd. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. What about him? Her lips pressed into a thin line, and she glanced around the room as if worried someone might overhear. You were right, she admitted finally, her voice barely above a whisper. He told me about the fraud case. I felt a flicker of satisfaction but kept my expression neutral. And he said it was a misunderstanding, she continued quickly, as if trying to convince herself. That his business partner was trying to smear him. I raised an eyebrow. You believe that? Angela didn't answer right away. Instead, she stared down at her coffee, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the ceramic mug. I don't know what to believe anymore, she admitted softly. Her vulnerability caught me off guard. Angela was always so polished, so sure of herself. Seeing her like this felt strange. This isn't just about the fraud case, is it? I asked. Her eyes flicked up to meet mine, and for a moment she looked like she was about to argue. But then she deflated. No, she said quietly. It's not. I waited, letting the silence stretch between us until she finally broke it. Things with Todd, they're not what I thought they'd be, she said, her voice tinged with regret. He's different. Controlling. And now, With all this coming out about his past, I'm starting to wonder if I've made a mistake. I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped me. You think? Angela flinched, but I didn't apologize. You threw away our marriage for this guy, Angela. For someone you barely knew. And now you're surprised he's not the knight in shining armor you thought he was? Her jaw tightened, and for a moment I thought she'd snap back. But then her shoulders slumped. I didn't come here to fight, Daniel, she said softly. I don't know what to do. Her admission hung in the air between us, heavy and unexpected. You could start by being honest, I said finally. With yourself. With Mia. Stop playing this game where you and Todd pretend to be the perfect family. She deserves better than that. Angela nodded slowly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I know, she said. I thought I was doing the right thing. For me. For Mia. I shook my head. The right thing would have been working on our marriage instead of running to the first guy who gave you attention. But that's in the past now. The only thing that matters is Mia. And if Todd's as controlling as you say, you need to think about how that's going to affect her. Angela looked away, her expression conflicted. You're right, she said after a long pause. I need to figure things out. You do, I said firmly. And until you do, keep Todd at arm's length from Mia. She doesn't need to get caught in the middle of this. Angela nodded again, wiping at her eyes quickly before standing. Thanks, Daniel, she said, her voice shaky. I watched her leave, a mix of emotions swirling in my chest. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated, but all I could think about was Mia. She deserved stability, and if Angela was finally starting to see Todd for who he really was, maybe, just maybe, things would start to change. That night I got a text from Sarah. Any fallout from Angela yet? I typed back quickly. She admitted I was right about Todd. She's starting to crack. Sarah's reply came almost instantly. Good. Keep the pressure on. Todd's the weak link, and once he breaks, the whole house of cards will come down. I stared at the message for a moment, a cold determination settling over me. Angela and Todd had spent years trying to undermine me, but now the tables were turning. Todd's facade was starting to crumble, and Angela's doubts were the first crack in their armor. This was far from over, but for the first time, I felt like I was in control of the game. Angela's confession at the coffee shop stuck with me for days. Hearing her admit that things with Todd weren't as perfect as they seemed was satisfying, but it also set off alarm bells. If Todd was as controlling as she hinted, that meant trouble, not just for Angela, but for Mia too. And trouble wasn't long in coming. It started with an unexpected phone call Friday evening while I was making dinner. The name on the screen read Sarah, and her tone was sharp the moment I answered. Daniel, you're going to want to sit down for this. What is it? I asked, setting the spatula down and stepping out of Mia's earshot. I did some more digging on Todd, she said. Turns out, his financial problems didn't end with that fraud case. He's drowning in debt, and I found evidence that he's been shifting money between Angela's accounts and his own to keep up appearances. What? My voice came out louder than I intended, and I quickly stepped further into the hallway. You heard me, Sarah said. He's using Angela as a piggy bank. From what I've found, he's funneled over $30,000 out of her savings account over the past year alone. And that's just what I can see. Who knows how much more he's hiding? My stomach churned. Angela might have made her bed, but Todd dragging her, and by extension Mia, into his financial disaster was crossing a line. That's not all, Sarah continued. He's also been trying to land a new business deal, but the people he's working with are shady. If it goes south, Angela could be on the hook for whatever debt he racks up. I ran a hand through my hair, the weight of this new information pressing down on me. Thanks for telling me, Sarah. This changes everything. Keep your guard up, Daniel, she warned. Todd's not just a manipulator, he's desperate. Desperate people are dangerous. That warning echoed in my mind the next day when I dropped Mia off at her mom's house for the weekend. Angela had texted me earlier, asking for extra time with Mia, and while I wasn't thrilled about the idea, I agreed for Mia's sake. Angela answered the door with a forced smile, but her eyes looked tired, like she hadn't slept well. Todd was nowhere in sight. "Thanks for letting me have her," she said, stepping aside as Mia bolted inside. "She's been talking about this all week." "No problem," I said, eyeing her carefully. "Everything okay?" Angela hesitated, her gaze flickering toward the living room before she nodded. "Yeah. Fine." But her strained voice and tense posture told a different story. I glanced past her, spotting Mia's shoes already kicked off by the couch. "Where's Todd?" I asked casually. She stiffened, folding her arms across her chest. "He's out running errands." "Uh-huh," I said, not buying it for a second. "Angela, if something's going on." "It's fine, Daniel," she snapped, her voice tight. "I've got it under control." Her sharp tone startled me, but before I could press further, Mia came running back to the door. "Bye, Daddy," she said, throwing her arms around my waist. I hugged her tightly, forcing a smile. "Have fun, Butterfly. Call me if you need anything." As I walked back to my car, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. Later that night, my phone buzzed again, another message from Sarah. "Check your email. You're going to want to see this." I opened the email and found a series of attachments, screenshots of public records, financial documents, and one particularly damning police report. My heart sank as I read through it. The report detailed an incident from 3 years ago, involving Todd and a former girlfriend. The relationship had ended in a heated confrontation that escalated to the point where police were called. While no charges were filed, the report painted Todd as volatile and aggressive, someone who used intimidation to get his way. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. This was more than just financial manipulation. Todd had a pattern of controlling behavior that extended well beyond Angela. And now, he was living under the same roof as my daughter. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, I decided to confront Angela. I couldn't stay silent, not when Mia's safety might be at risk. When I called, Angela answered on the second ring. "Daniel?" she said, her voice wary. "We need to talk," I said firmly. "In person." She sighed, but I could hear the tension in her breath. "Fine. Can you come by later?" "I'll be there at noon," I said, ending the call before she could argue. When I arrived at Angela's house, Todd's SUV was parked in the driveway. My jaw tightened as I knocked on the door, half expecting him to answer. But it was Angela who opened it, her expression guarded. "Come in," she said reluctantly, stepping aside. I followed her into the living room, where Todd was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone. He looked up as I entered, his smirk firmly in place. "Daniel," he said, leaning back casually. "What a surprise." I ignored him, focusing on Angela. "We need to talk." "Alone." Todd chuckled, but Angela cut him off. "Todd, can you give us a minute?" His smirk faltered, and for a moment I thought he'd argue. But then he stood, brushing past me with a muttered, "Sure. Whatever." Once he was gone, Angela sat down, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "What's this about?" I didn't hold back. "Todd's past. His debts. His behavior. Angela, he's dragging you down, and it's only a matter of time before it spills over onto Mia." Her face paled, but she tried to defend him. "He's made mistakes, sure, but—" "Angela," I interrupted, leaning forward. "This isn't just about you anymore. If Todd's as controlling and reckless as he seems, Mia could get caught in the crossfire. Is that what you want?" Her eyes filled with tears, and she looked away, her composure crumbling. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "Start by protecting Mia," I said firmly. "Whatever's going on between you and Todd, don't let it touch her. And if you need help getting out, you know where to find me." Angela nodded, her shoulders trembling. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll think about it." As I drove home, a mix of relief and unease settled over me. Angela was starting to see Todd for who he really was, but I wasn't sure how far she'd go to protect herself. Or Mia. One thing was certain, though: Todd's days of playing the perfect stepfather were numbered. The following week felt like a ticking time bomb. Angela's hesitation to confront Todd was eating at me, but I knew pushing too hard could backfire. If Todd really was as controlling as she hinted, forcing her hand too soon might only make things worse. Still, the silence was unnerving. No texts from Angela, no updates about Mia, no signs of Todd trying to assert his smug presence. It felt like the calm before a storm, and I braced myself for whatever was coming. The storm hit on Thursday morning. I was sitting at my desk at work when my phone buzzed with an incoming call. The screen flashed Angela, and I hesitated before answering. "Angela?" Her voice came through in a panicked rush. "Daniel, I need you to come to the house. Now." My stomach dropped. "What's going on?" "It's Todd," she said, her voice shaking. He's out of control." I grabbed my keys without another word. When I arrived, Angela was standing on the porch, arms wrapped tightly around herself. Her face was pale, and I could see tear streaks on her cheeks. "What happened?" I asked as I hurried up the steps. Angela opened her mouth to speak, but before she could, Todd appeared in the doorway behind her. His face was flushed with anger, and his eyes darted between us. "Look who's here," he said, his voice dripping with venom. "Come to save the day, have you?" "Todd, stop," Angela said, her voice trembling. "Stop what?" he snapped, stepping closer to her. "I'm not the one inviting my ex-husband into my house, am I?" I stepped between them, my voice steady. "Back off, Todd." He laughed bitterly. "Or what? You think you're some kind of hero, Daniel? Riding in to rescue Angela from the big bad wolf? This isn't about me," I said. "It's about Mia. Where is she?" "She's fine," Angela said quickly, her eyes darting toward the living room. "She's in her room." I nodded, my focus shifting back to Todd. "Whatever's going on here, you need to step back. Now." Todd's jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought he might lash out. But then he smirked, shaking his head. "You think you're so much better than me, don't you? Better than someone who manipulates and steals from the people closest to him?" "Yeah, I do," I said bluntly. That hit a nerve. Todd's smirk disappeared, replaced by a dark scowl. "Watch your mouth," he growled. "Or what?" I shot back. "You'll add another incident to your record? Go ahead, Todd. Show Angela exactly who you are." Angela flinched at my words, but Todd's expression faltered. He stepped back, muttering under his breath, and disappeared into the house. The moment he was gone, Angela sagged against the porch railing, tears streaming down her face. "Angela," I said gently, "you can't keep doing this. If not for yourself, then for Mia." She nodded weakly, her hands trembling. "I know," she whispered. I don't know how to get out." "I'll help you," I said firmly. "But you have to take the first step. Tell him it's over. Tell him to leave." She hesitated, fear flashing across her face. "He won't go easily," she said. "Then we'll make him," I replied. "You're not alone in this." By that evening, I had a plan. Angela agreed to stay with Mia at my house for a few days while she figured out her next move. She packed a bag and left while Todd was still out, her movements quick and deliberate. When she arrived at my door, Mia ran into my arms, her smile lighting up the room. "Daddy!" "Hey, Butterfly," I said, hugging her tightly. "You and Mommy are staying here for a bit, okay?" "Okay," she said happily, oblivious to the tension between Angela and me. As I showed Mia to her room, Angela stood awkwardly in the hallway, clutching her bag. "Thank you," she said quietly. I nodded, my voice low. "This is about Mia. She comes first." Angela's eyes filled with tears, and she quickly turned away, retreating to the guest room. The peace didn't last long. On Saturday morning, Todd showed up unannounced. He banged on the door, shouting Angela's name loud enough to wake the entire neighborhood. "Angela! Open the damn door!" I opened it instead, stepping outside and closing it behind me. "Go home, Todd," I said coldly. He glared at me, his fists clenched. "Where is she?" "She doesn't want to see you," I said. "It's over, Todd. Walk away." His laugh was hollow and bitter. "You think you've won, don't you?" "This isn't a game," I said firmly. "And if you care about Mia at all, you'll leave her out of this." Todd's jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought he might take a swing at me. But then his shoulders slumped, and he muttered, "You're going to regret this," before stalking off to his car. Inside, Angela was shaking. "He's not going to stop," she said, her voice barely audible. "He will," I said. "Because we're going to make sure he can't." I grabbed my phone and called Sarah. "It's time," I said. "Send me everything you've got on Todd. We're shutting him down." Todd's behavior over the weekend made one thing crystal clear. This was the breaking point. He wasn't just a threat to Angela's peace of mind, he was a danger to Mia's stability. If Angela had any doubts left about walking away from him, Todd had erased them with his temper and his threats. It was time to finish this once and for all. On Monday morning, I dropped Mia off at school, keeping my demeanor calm despite the whirlwind in my head. I'd spent the entire weekend working with Sarah to prepare. She'd pulled every record, every scrap of evidence about Todd's shady dealings, and we mapped out the strategy to take him down. Angela, still shaken but resolute, sat across from me at my kitchen table that morning. She looked tired but determined, a spark of her old self shining through the cracks. "What do we do now?" she asked. "We expose him," I said simply. "We let the world see him for who he really is." Step 1 was the restraining order. With Sarah's help, Angela filed an emergency petition citing Todd's aggressive behavior and her fears for Mia's safety. The judge granted it on the spot. By the afternoon, Todd was legally barred from coming near Angela, Mia, or me. Todd's reaction was swift, and exactly what I expected. He called Angela repeatedly, leaving furious voicemails that only added to the pile of evidence against him. "You think you can cut me out?" he spat in one message. "You're nothing without me, Angela. You'll see." I made sure to save every word. Step 2 was taking the fight to the public. Using the documents Sarah had uncovered, I tipped off a local journalist about Todd's fraudulent past. Within days, a damning expose hit the news. Local businessman's shady deals leave trail of victims. The article painted Todd as a con artist who used charm and manipulation to get what he wanted, leaving others to clean up the mess. The fraud case, his debts, and even his history of volatile behavior were all laid bare for everyone to see. The fallout was immediate. Todd's business partners cut ties with him, his social circle distanced themselves, and his carefully curated reputation crumbled. But the real victory came when Todd confronted Angela for the last time. He showed up at her lawyer's office uninvited, looking disheveled and desperate. Angela, accompanied by her attorney, held her ground. "You did this to me!" Todd shouted, slamming his fists on the table. "No, Todd," Angela said firmly, her voice steady for the first time in months. "You did this to yourself." She handed him a folder filled with evidence, bank records showing his siphoning of her money, court filings for the restraining order, and copies of the expose. "It's over," she said. "I'm done with you. Stay away from me and Mia." For a moment, Todd looked like he might explode, but then something in him seemed to break. He slumped back in his chair, his anger giving way to defeat. "You'll regret this," he muttered, but his voice lacked the venom it once held. Angela stood, her attorney beside her, and walked out of the room without looking back. That night, as Mia slept soundly in her room, Angela and I sat on the back porch, the weight of the day finally settling in. "Thank you," she said softly, her gaze fixed on the stars. "For what?" I asked, leaning back in my chair. "For not giving up on me. For helping me see what I couldn't before," she said. I nodded, my voice steady. I didn't do this for you, Angela. I did it for Mia. She deserves stability, and so do you. Angela smiled faintly. I know. And I'm going to make sure she has it. No more drama. No more Todd. In the weeks that followed, things slowly began to fall into place. Angela moved into a small apartment nearby, finally free of Todd's toxic influence. Mia adjusted quickly, thrilled to have both her parents working together again, this time, for real. As for Todd, he faded into the background. The restraining order and public humiliation left him with little room to maneuver, and he eventually disappeared from our lives entirely. Looking back, I realized this wasn't just about protecting Mia or winning a fight against Angela and Todd. It was about reclaiming control of my life and showing Mia what it meant to stand up for what's right. Angela and I weren't perfect, and we never would be. But for the first time since the divorce, I felt a glimmer of hope that we could be the parents Mia needed us to be. And that was more than enough for me.